what is it in your mind about Candy Crush that has caught on in the way that it has? Why is it so big in the industry and in culture writ large?
Well, I mean, I think we're blessed with, for those who aren't playing Candy Crush, with an incredible audience. So just a quick way of background, Candy Crush and King as a network has about 250 million monthly actives. So it's really a sizable network. And from the introduction of Candy Crush many years ago, it's now about seven years into being a live title, we've had such an incredible audience. We think about 1 billion people have touched the game. It's been downloaded well over 2 billion times. And the innovation that has to continue to happen in a live title is what continues to drive kind of that stability of Candy Crush. So it's not just about the game that we made 7 years ago. It's about the game that we manage every day and drive a lot of change every day. The game has changed dramatically over the past 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so talk a little bit more about that. 7 years is an eternity in tech writ large, but of course in the mobile industry. So how have you managed to kind of keep the game going for so long and make sure that what is essentially a pretty straightforward gameplay concept continues to be engaging and exciting even so many years later?
So behind it is, I think, kind of like a company that is obsessed with a couple of things. Focus on innovation. And so for innovation for all our titles, but Candy Crush being our biggest one, we continue to drive growth in Candy Crush. So the thing that I didn't say is that Candy Crush 7 years in is growing. So it's kind of one of those amazing things in the industry. So what it takes is a company that's focused on two things. One is incredible player centricity. So we're always thinking about our players and talking to them and engaging with them and really obsessing about the experiences that they have. And second is kind of this concept of continuous innovation, never ever taking anything for granted. So a quick anecdote on that. I was meeting with a colleague from the industry that follows a lot of our games. So they have a very successful game themselves. And he said something amazing to me over dinner. He basically said, I knew you guys were serious about innovation when I saw how you changed how the game mode itself, how the game is actually played itself. So we went after something that a lot of people won't do, which is we changed some of the core mechanics of the game. We changed the gameplay itself. And that's very risky, right? You have something incredibly successful. You have something that's already, beloved by hundreds of millions of people. To go in and say, okay, now I'm going to start thinking about a completely different way that audience might play. It might, render differently, or it might play it a little bit differently. It takes a lot of guts to do that, and a lot of kind of concept of what am I trying to solve? What's the issue that basically drives a lot of surprise to the players?
And how has King and Candy Crush evolved with a rapidly changing business? I know that King has driven some of it, but also reacted to what consumers expect and how things change on that side.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the evolution of the mobile industry, it's just happening, like you said, in light speed. It changes dramatically. What I think is incredibly powerful about where we are in mobile gaming right now is the free-to-play model. And that's the model that Candy Crush basically adopts and many games adopt. So what's core to how we design our games and how we design Candy is that the vast majority of players are able to complete all levels without ever monetizing. And what we think, why we like that, is because it basically broadens the audience as much as possible. Behind Candy Crush and behind the company are hundreds, the company itself is 2,000 people, and there are hundreds of people in development, in art, in design, in data, which are basically looking at everything that when we are designing the levels and making sure that the balance is exactly right. So kind of there's a lot of creativity and that's being poured in every single one of those levels that we're designing. And the premise is that, which is how is it challenging enough that it's fun? How is it not so challenging that you get stuck and you get really upset about it, or that you feel like you have to pay to advance. So there's just, I think that's the art of the creativity in Candy Crush. You called it a very simple game, and it is. To make something simple, apparently simple, takes a lot of complexity and a lot of creativity. But at the end of the day, I think that's the heart of the creative engine at the company, is kind of making sure that we have the right balance for the players.
So we've only got a minute left here, and I wanted to touch on this fact that Candy Crush has a much more diverse user base than a lot of video games, much more female-led user base. How does that affect development, and how do you see that user base reflected not just in the people that play the game, but the people that make the game?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're blessed not just with a large audience, but a very diverse audience. So if you think about gaming, typically much more male-centric, and with our network, we actually skew the other way. It's a lot more. We have a lot of males, but it's majority female by a little bit. And for gaming, that's huge. Typically, it's a vast majority male versus female. And here, it's an audience that's really large. I will make 2 points about it. One is that audience is global. That audience is very diverse, comes from many nationalities, talked about gender, talked about, like, they come from all walks of life, all economic disciplines. I think our central recognition at the company is we can only serve that audience if we as a company are as diverse as they are. And so we've made diversity one of our biggest points. It comes from multiple places. I think we get way more talent, we get better creativity, better innovation if we're a more diverse company and a more inclusive company. It comes from a personal passion of mine. I have 10-year-old twin girls who are getting into coding, and I obsess about how do they not get disaffected by tech and by the industry. They should be the coders and the game makers of tomorrow. And it comes from my personal passion. I'm a product of someone who thrived when I was as part of inclusive companies. I've seen companies which were inclusive, and I had great career when they were. And when they weren't, I didn't do my best work. So my biggest passion right now, drive diversity and inclusiveness at the company to represent our audience.